I think really the goal of this video was to break down what we spent, and then I think we're going to reflect a little bit on what we did and what we would do differently, so that if you guys are planning a building like this, hopefully you can learn from what we did. I don't think we have any regrets about building a post frame building.
Not at all. In fact, I highly recommend, if you're considering building a shop, that you look into post frame. I think it is the most efficient way to build a building quickly.
We're Riley and Courtney Casey. After traveling full-time in a truck camper we built, we fell in love with Northern Idaho and purchased 20 acres of raw, off-grid land. With the goal of being dried in before winter, we wasted no time and got to work building our 30 by 40 post frame building. There was only one issue. We had never even built a shed before. With a steep learning curve, we spent our days scouring YouTube for advice and working with our hands, and after 3 months, the results left us speechless. Some call it a house, others call it a barn dominium. We call it our dream property.
We got a lot of questions at Overland Expo about our building, far more than we anticipated, and it got us talking about it, and we realized we never took the opportunity to explain what we were doing.
I was gonna say that, well, we had a clear plan in our head, so it was obvious, but we never had that.
We literally could not explain to you what we were doing because rarely did we know what we were doing more than a day or two in advance.
It turns out that buying the property was the easy part and everything else was hard.
As soon as we owned it, we looked at each other and kind of said, now what?
Step one was to rent an excavator, and we quickly realized that we could own an excavator for the same cost as renting one. You need sunglasses? You're squinting a lot.
Yes. That's better.
I'd mentally been preparing to buy land, but then when we turned around and then bought a really expensive piece of equipment, I think that was the first scary moment for me.
Getting the excavator to the property was a challenge. Finding
Once we had the excavator to the property, that was when it really dawned on us that it was just the two of us and we had a lot of work ahead of us.
There is a steep learning curve to using these controls, but slowly and surely I'm starting to get it. For me, the scariest moment came when it was time to actually decide where to put our building.
That probably sounds really easy, but that was actually one of the hardest things to figure out. We had 20 acres and we had to figure out where the best place to put the building was, but what makes something the best place? We really leaned into our neighbors for that, and they had a lot of really helpful insight on things we should consider: how close to the road, how steep, drainage, what the dirt composition was, how much rock there was. And so we took all of that into account for about 2 days, and then we said, this is where we're breaking ground.
One of the favorite spots about the site we chose is there's room for both a shop and a house within about 100 yards of each other, which will mean only running one set of utilities.
Then it felt like we'd overcome the first hurdle of where do we put the building, and then it was time to cut our first tree down.
That's when we realized that neither of us had ever cut down a tree before. Another learning curve.
It sounds easy, but these were really big trees. Some of them were dead. It was not as easy as just like grabbing the chainsaw and making a cut. I mean, we could have made a really big mistake. We could have gotten hurt. And that was when I think I realized this wasn't a simple project.
So I decided to splurge on a pro-level Husqvarna chainsaw.
From that point, there were several weeks where we didn't really spend any money other than on fuel, and just cleared and cleared and cleared and cleared some more. Riley had to go get another cup of coffee. Side note, we have coffee mugs now. We also have apparel, and I'll put a link to that below so that you guys can check that out. The land clearing was really fun because it was such an immediate transformation. It was hard work, but it was super rewarding.
As the days went on, the views opened up more and we could see the rock face starting to peek out from behind the trees behind our building site.
And right when I finally felt like we were confident in land clearing, we were done. Land clearing ended up being the cheapest phase of the build, and we ended up spending $2,750.
So with the land clearing finally complete, it was time to start the excavation work. We had already purchased our M1078 Army truck, but it was still in California and it had not been turned into a dump truck yet. So we turned around, made the trip south, converted the Army truck, and headed north again.
It turns out that driving the Army truck north was an adventure in itself. We spent 2 days on the road going 52 miles an hour in a really loud truck with no air conditioning, and it was fun. Maybe I'm just trying to convince myself that it was fun, but I think it was fun.
This last weekend, we got a ton of questions about that truck. When are you going to turn it into an Overlander? Never. After spending 1,200 miles in that truck, we will never be turning it into an overlander.
We knew we needed a 4-wheel drive dump truck, and it was a really cheap, functional way to achieve that. I have a lot of respect for people that travel full-time in those trucks because there's no way around it. They're uncomfortable. Once we had the Army truck up north, we were able to start on something else we had never done before, which is excavating and dirt work.
Our goal was to build as big a flat spot as we could fit. Once we had our flat spot created, then we'd decide how big the building was.
We wanted as big of a building as we could possibly have because more space is always better than less space in a workshop. I think at that point we were still thinking that it was going to be 40 by 60.
I kept talking about 80 by 100.
That's when we picked up the rotary laser transit and started doing our surveying, and we quickly realized that big of a building was not going to fit without some serious dirt work.
So I agreed with Courtney, okay, we'll downsize and we'll build a 40 by 60. 2,400 square feet is going to be tight, but we'll make it work.
Aside from owning the dump truck and the excavator, our biggest cost during that phase was fuel.
We're pretty sure that we can sell the dump truck for about what we have into it when we're done, so we're just going to call it free for now. It just costs us fuel to operate. All in, we spent $3,329 on the excavation part of our project. So now we were on to the most intimidating part of the project, and this is the part of the project that I had pretty much been ignoring up until this point, which was that we needed to come up with a plan for our building.
And I know it sounds dramatic, but we had literally never even built a shed before. We'd done remodels, but with a remodel, everything is already laid out for you, and you're just going in and tweaking and changing stuff that had already been done. When someone asked us what kind of building we were going to build, that was when I think it dawned on us that we had a lot of figuring out to do.
The first thing that came into our heads was, well, duh, we're going to build a steel building. We had just helped a friend down in California put one together. The kit went up really fast. It seemed like the obvious answer.
Until we found lead times, which ended up being our enemy on the entire project. It also dawned on us that if we wanted to do a steel building, it meant we would have to pour our concrete slab before we began any construction. If you guys have watched any of our videos, you know that our road is a problem. And we quickly realized that we were going to be spending the entire summer just getting the road to a point where a concrete truck could make it up. That was when someone suggested a pole barn. And I think we both kind of scoffed at first. Pole barns are hay barns. Pole barns are where you park your RV. It's not somewhere you live.
Especially because all the pole barns I'd ever seen until this point, the posts were buried in the ground, and the idea of just setting a wood post in the ground to build a foundation was not going to fly. But they've come a long ways, and there are a lot of really cool options out there now for post frame buildings.
Building a post frame building allows you to pour the concrete slab at any point once the building's done.
Post frame is one of the most common shop construction methods found in North Idaho, which means that building materials are readily available at building supply stores. We can go down with the Army truck, pick them up, and haul them back to the property ourselves. We don't have to rely on trucking and delivery services to somehow get them up to our job site.
Once we had the gravel delivered, it was time to work on putting our footings in.
We discovered that a local supplier carried the permacolumn concrete base foundation system, and it was the obvious choice. Buying the permacolumn system increased our cost a little bit, but it meant that we didn't have to figure out how to pour concrete on site because the concrete was already done.
We ended up renting a skid steer with an auger, which was a huge time saver. We ended up being able to drill the holes in one day and set the columns in another day.
Using the permacolumn system also meant that we could get all the column bases set and start erecting our building without having to wait for concrete to cure.
Our foundation total is a little misleading because we do need to remember that there will be a concrete slab included in this eventually, but as of now, we've spent $4,839 with our foundation.
We estimate that the concrete slab is going to cost us somewhere between $7,000 and $10,000.
Material shortages were the name of the game with this build, and our first big hurdle was roof trusses.
12 weeks was the shortest time frame we were going to be able to get our 40-foot trusses in.
12 weeks was winter.
That would mean that we were still going to have bare walls when the snow started falling.
What are bare walls?
Rawr!
In a last-ditch effort to try to get a building up before winter, we started calling anyone we could find on the internet who might make or have trusses.
And we lucked out. We found 30-foot trusses in stock, ready for next day delivery with the appropriate snow loads for our building.
I'm still not really sure how that happened, but we got super lucky and they actually showed up. At that point, we were a little bummed that our building was going to be shrinking in size. It already felt like we had downsized it.
But our neighbor had a brilliant plan. We could build one really tall 30 by 40 now and build a much shorter 30 by 40 off at an L in a future date.
It turns out that our neighbor, Pat, thanks Pat, probably saved our entire timeline, because the further we got in the build, we realized that if we'd been building a bigger building, I don't think we would have gotten it done in time.
With just the two of us working as hard as we could, it still took a significant amount of time to get that building up.
It turns out there was another building supply shortage that affected us, and that was the glue that they used to make the columns that we needed for our bases.
Finding 3-ply columns was no problem, but we needed 4-ply columns to be able to support the weight of our upstairs apartment plans and to support the snow load. However, we lucked out in a big way, and a local contractor actually had 7 columns left over from a job and was willing to sell them to us.
But we needed 8.
So we ended up having to make one of them ourselves by starting with a 3-ply column and adding a 4th ply.
With our permacolumn set, it was time to start erecting a building, and that's when it dawned on us that lumber prices were astronomical. We'd been hearing it in the news, we'd been hearing people talking about it in the hardware store, but it doesn't really hit you until you go to pay your bill.
We spent about twice on our lumber package as I think it would cost if you were to go down and order it right now.
I think at this point we'd been trying to use the excavator for every single job we needed because we owned it. But as we started trying to plan how we were going to hang our roof trusses, we realized that it was not the right equipment for the job.
Enter into our lives the telehandler, the single-handed best piece of equipment we have ever spent money renting.
I have a love-hate relationship with the telehandler because I was the one driving it, so for 2 weeks I was so bored. It felt like all I did was lift Riley up and down and drive around and up and down. And I think I ate a lot of snacks and watched a lot of YouTube on my phone.
The telehandler was a real lifesaver. Not only did it allow us to stand up the walls and load the roof trusses, it also allowed us to unload all the heavy sheet metal off the back of the Army truck and carry me around high in the air building the building.
The telehandler rental felt like a big investment at the time, but looking back, I don't think we could have done this project without it. We opted to use screws in a lot of applications on our building. We got a lot of feedback on that. They were structural code rated screws, but that did add a significant cost to our building over the traditional method of using nails.
In the end, I'm really happy with the decision to use screws. I just think that for this type of building project, they are a better fastener.
Including the equipment rental, we spent $13,887 on our rough framing. Then it came time to order windows, which ended up being probably our biggest lead time nightmare.
In my mind, I thought that we could always just install the windows later. We'll cut a big hole, we'll pop the window in, no problem. But the more I researched it, then I realized that the correct way to put windows in is to put them in first and then put the setting up around them.
Then we went to order windows.
12 weeks. Again, putting us well into winter with no walls on our building.
In the past, I've used in-stock windows from Home Depot and Lowe's, but I really wanted dark framed windows, whether it be brown or black, and that is not something that we could find in stock at any of the big box stores.
But thanks to you guys, we reached out and we got overwhelming recommendations to check out the store called Overhausers in Spokane. After a long day of searching all 3 stories of that building, we came home with all of the windows and doors we were going to need to finish our project.
They were really nice windows. We ended up immensely under budget, and we only spent $2,600 on our windows and man door.
This was the first time in the project that it felt like we were finally saving money rather than just spending money.
With our windows installed, it was time to order our metal siding. We were pleasantly surprised, and metal siding was the only thing that wasn't back ordered.
We ordered it on a Tuesday and it came that very same Friday.
Paying the metal siding bill hurt.
Metal siding was up about 50% from earlier in the summer, so the price was significantly higher than we had expected.
We ended up spending $11,257 on our metal siding and roofing. That's a lot of money.
It was a lot of money. We were starting to feel the crunch of the budget.
As soon as I saw our metal siding and we started getting it installed, I think all of my worries went away, and that was really what transformed our building into a building.
So at this point, living in a truck camper and building off grid was really starting to wear on us. It was dirty, it was hot, and it was uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's a really good summary. I think even the dogs felt that way.
But with the roof installed, we could start parking inside the building, in the shade and in the gravel, and things got a lot better.
The weather started cooling off, we had a roof, It was starting to feel like a building, and I think that lit a fire under our butts to get it done. Before we'd started our building, we'd gotten some quotes from some local pole barn companies on what their kits would cost, and our only goal was to really stay under that.
And it did turn out for us that by sourcing all the materials individually and shopping for deals, we were able to beat the kit price.
And end up with a better product. In total, to build our 30 by 40 pole barn with 18-foot eaves, we spent $41,732, which is a lot of money.
But we are so stoked to have a building up with walls on it, and the snow has not even fallen yet.
We ended up building our building in 3 months, but it was a long 3 months. We worked every single day.
When we weren't working on the building, we were figuring out our plan for the next day, ordering materials, and editing videos. There are quite a few places we could have saved money on this project. We could have buried the poles straight in the ground. We could have skipped having the eaves with the enclosed soffits. We didn't need so many large windows. The easiest way to have saved money on this building would have been to build the walls shorter. It would have meant that we wouldn't have had to use a scissor lift. It would have saved a ton of material, a ton of time, and it would have saved on rental equipment costs.
18 feet doesn't sound that tall until you're up there.
That makes the peak at almost 25 feet, and it is way up in the air.
I don't want to build pole barns for a living, but I am so glad that we did it ourselves. It was incredibly rewarding.
With the building up, it's time to build our apartment, figure out our power system, our water system, our sewage system, and we've been getting a lot of questions about what our plans are for that.
Just like everything we do, we don't really have one.
So if you want to see what we're going to do, keep watching and find out.
As winter arrives, we're going to have some new challenges. The biggest one being how we're going to get to our property. We're hoping to be able to keep building this winter. We've got big plans for the apartment. We've got big plans for an addition. I think that building a post frame building with just 2 people is totally achievable. I highly recommend renting the appropriate equipment when you feel it's appropriate, whether it be a telehandler for hanging trusses or a scissor lift for installing windows.
The absolute hardest part of this process for me was just getting started, coming up with a plan, and executing it.
I think the hardest part for me was battling material shortages and having to pivot. We'd make a plan, and then that plan wasn't an option, and we have to make a new plan. And I think the most exciting part for me was when we finished putting the metal siding on and we had an enclosed building. It actually poured rain that night, and that was when it dawned on me that winter was coming, and I was really happy that we had pulled it off.
It was so fun to celebrate in the success of having a dried-in building.
That's only the beginning for us. We have plans for an awesome apartment upstairs that we've already started working on, so make sure to watch that playlist. Make sure to subscribe. If you can give us a like, that'd be awesome. We've had so much fun sharing this process with you. We have really big plans for an addition to the shop that we can't quite tell you about yet, but they're going to be epic.
We hope you enjoyed this video, and we hope it helped shed some light on why we did things the way we did and how much it cost us.
If you have any questions, drop them below, and we'll see you guys soon.
See you next time.